start with a brief introduction of yourself and your role.
My name is Anil Wasif. I am one of the co-founders and trustee of BacharLorai Global. So, BacharLorai is a Bengali word that translates to striving to survive. We started off during the COVID-19 pandemic to support people by connecting those who want to help the diaspora to those who need it, so people in Bangladesh. Fast forward to 2025, we are a social impact agency that's empowering underserved communities through community building, policy research, and social welfare programs um, across the world. I am an economist by training. I went to the University of Toronto for my undergrad in econ and poli-sci, and I've done my master's in public policy from McGill University. I have been a career public servant with the Ontario government for the past 10 years. And so I'm very interested in the intersection of employment, education, and policy.
What do you think are the biggest structural barriers preventing young professionals from entering and staying in diplomatic or multilateral areas?
I think when I think about young people looking for jobs right now, I think about three different problems they're facing. One is access to information, which is, do they even know where to look for those jobs? Are they in those spheres of influence? That's the first one. The second one, I think, is often understanding the application process. There's been many times when there were many smart people who would be so good for the job, but they're not really good at the application process. Who do you talk to? How do you land an interview? How do you network? And then the third thing in all of this is that governments have not created equitable policies for youth to be at the forefront of being considered for jobs. And that's because employment policies are still stuck the way they were set in the 70s and 80s. And so to get an entry level job, somehow you need a master's degree today. So those three problems can be looked at it from a personal perspective, like what do you know, access to information, to sort of an organizational perspective, which is what are the processes you have to go through to land a job, and then also from a macro public policy perspective, which is what are the systemic barriers that are keeping our youth from entering the job market.
So what changes would you suggest to ensure youth involvement becomes meaningful rather than tokenistic?
This is going to go against the advice of many, renowned academic folks, but I actually think we have to make the job market more approachable in itself. We have this amazing talent of like room of talented people who are waiting to find jobs, and then we have these amazing companies that are looking for the smartest people in the world. But for some reason, they're not talking, so something has to change over there. One of the things which we are testing through our organization and then just volunteer work is how can we make opportunities change the look and feel of the opportunities we are providing so that the Gen Z audience can be receptive towards it, right? And I say this with deep introspection because when I was a millennial coming up, everybody used to say, these millennials, they're coming, they don't really understand anything, until finally then they changed the language to language we actually understand. And then you had the millennials take over the job market slowly. With Gen Z, we just have to do the same thing. We have to provide them the information in the format that they respond to. That's one. From a process perspective, with the advent of AI, the entire game has changed. Now we need to be even more careful in differentiating between somebody who is smart and has used AI for an application versus somebody who's brilliant and has not used AI. So understanding the human impact of artificial intelligence in the job market is very important. And I think academia and governments and just civil society needs to think deeply about that because it's getting into sort of a climax situation. And I think the third piece of it is borders. There's just amazing talent all across the world. There's a lot of issues that are sort of restricting talented people from doing the work that they can do to benefit different companies, organizations. Um, but with domestic policies shifting towards a more unilateral state of the world, that's going to end up challenging all these jobs at the UN, all these jobs at advocacy organizations, people doing internships just like you guys. Like how the understanding the impact of those changes to sort of the global agenda and the global employment figures, I think is also going to be important.
I'm really excited for the answer of this question. If you could propose one major policy change tomorrow to make international diplomacy more accessible to youth, what would it be?
I think we should be doing more youth assemblies. In it, I think over since the pandemic, our ability to gather people in a room, that ability was restructured a lot. But now I think as technology is going sort of at the rate of speeds we have never seen before, I actually think it's not, now is like it's now more than important than ever to get young people in a room so that they can be exposed to what the UN does. They can be exposed to what an agency like UNICEF does. They can be exposed to like what folks on the ground are doing. And so I think we need to start gathering people, gathering young people, and I think that will be democracy in play because you will then have their attention. I think the way we're going about it is not working. We expect people to be on their phones, and so we have given in to Facebook and we have given in to WhatsApp and all those big companies, and we think that we can go about hiring young people that way. I want to challenge that. I actually think we're going to be more successful if we start convening young people at different conferences, at different gatherings, so that they not only understand. There's a very important knowledge transfer aspect to all of this as well. I think across the world, baby boomers are retiring and millennials are getting into leadership roles. There's this knowledge transfer that needs to happen that will not happen unless you start meeting people in person. Because most people who are retiring, they have not written books that Gen Z is going to come and read because they don't have the time to write the book and Gen Z doesn't like, dense language. So as the millennial, it has become equally important for us to be that bridging generation. And in order to be that bridging generation, my proposal is to get more young people from different backgrounds in the same rooms so they can talk to each other, but then also expose them to big institutions who are represented by folks that look like these young people.
How can young professionals ensure their policy suggestions are actually heard and implemented, not just collected?
That's a really good question. That's a question I've grappled with for the past 6 years in this sector. Um, I think it's important to create formal channels that can actually trace when ideas are developed by civil society. We have created the vehicles to collect ideas. So, I mean, the one thing about this world is we always think about the problems, but there's also a lot of success we have collectively achieved over the past 20 years, right? 20 years ago, there weren't collection vehicles for youth ideas as prominent as we have today. So, firstly, I think we should all thank each other and pat ourselves on the back for doing that. The question now is how do we advance it from the advocacy piece and transfer that into policy? To do that, I think that's when you need organizations stepping in, not just small organizations, big organizations, because they have a stake in this, right? These are their future employees, these are their future ambassadors. And enable it in a way where they are not only supporting sort of youth policy ideas in a community service way, but they're actually backing it with their institutional support. And that is when I think government stakeholders start to notice. And that is when a policy moves, right? Because when you're trying to move on a policy, you need to build consensus around private sector, government, nonprofits, and many other industries. And so if you want to sort of pass on youth ideas into the national level, you need to build stakeholder coalitions. And so that's one way. And the second way, I think, which is really important, is representation. I think the number is very low when it comes to youth representation in parliament. But at the same time, that number, the rate at which that number has been changing is higher than ever. We have more young people sitting in parliaments across the world than we ever did before. And I think, I actually think the gender ratio of those seats are also much closer to each other than we have seen for other sort of representative groups. But then the question becomes, how do we get more younger people in parliament? And you go back to that same answer, which is, are you engaging them in person so that somebody can dream to be a prime minister someday, right? And so that brings me to the third part, which is the conversation. I think the conversation, we need to turn the volume up on it, because if you are not talking about it, then somebody from some neighborhood in Sierra Leone is not going to even consider that their idea is worth sharing with somebody else. And so it's very important for big organizations to work hand in hand with civil society to highlight younger voices. And a lot of that work is also done through recognition. So identifying young people who are doing good things and who have bold ideas to change the world, how do we highlight them in a meaningful way so that stakeholders can get engaged on their ideas, and then government starts to take notice.
So much for your time and insights. We truly appreciate your input, and we'll make sure to incorporate your reflections into our final policy paper.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for thinking of me, and very good luck to all of you. I'm sure it's going to be a huge success.